Early into my exploration of Star Wars, I ended up stumbling upon a Wikipedia article for Shadow Stormtroopers, and that's who we're going to cover today, Shadow Stormtroopers. Imperial Shadow Stormtroopers, as they're officially known, different from Shadow Troopers, are one of the Empire's most famous and skilled units. They specialize in stealth missions and had the tech to boot. They were fanatically loyal to the Empire and were based off of the Republic's Shadow Troopers. They had top-of-the-line training and were only ever selected from the best Stormtroopers, though they weren't really given any additional training. They posed a strong threat to any normal Rebel operator, and though the unit was very experimental, they were definitely very skilled and successful in their missions, often working as giant hordes of troopers overwhelming any enemies with their stealth tech we will talk about later. While their armor looked like any normal black Stormtrooper armor, it was actually very advanced. Their armor had portable cloaking devices that allowed them to be almost completely invisible to the naked eye. They had a giant selection of blast rifles and carbines, as well as smoke and flash grenades, plus sometimes even jetpacks. Though they're definitely stealth-focused, they often attack their enemies in hordes, hoping to overwhelm them, as I mentioned earlier. Talking more about their armor, it was made out of a Stygian trioprismatic polymer. I completely did not pronounce that correctly, but that's because Star Wars. I don't know how to pronounce all of these made-up words. So, it basically allowed them to avoid sensors. We sometimes see Shadow Stormtroopers with a white Imperial insignia on the left side of their chest, or a bandolier, or a black pauldron, or a mix of the three. Commonly, we see them wearing the Imperial insignia, a bandolier, and a black pauldron, or just as plain black, or a mix of the three, as I said. Before I cover the Legends Stormtroopers, I want to specify the three most common blasters the troopers used. We see them wielding the E-11, the amazing T-21 heavy blaster rifle, as they're seen in Battlefront 2, and also DLT-19 blaster rifles. So, though I said I would cover Legends, Shadow Stormtroopers, there just isn't much more info in Legends that's different from canon. The only difference is in what they appeared in and sometimes who they worked for, basically. Also, they had an alternate name in Legends as well. But instead of covering them in Legends, since I still have some time, I think I'm going to compare them to Storm Commandos and Death Troopers, since all three are very elite Imperial units in black armor, and that means that I would have covered all three of them in videos then, which will be good. So, in another video, I figured out that Storm Commandos were worse than Death Troopers. We're going to first compare Shadow Troopers to Storm Commandos, and if the Shadow Troopers lose, then we already know who would win in the Death Trooper round. I have a video about both Storm Commandos and Death Troopers, and also a versus video for them on my channel from a long time ago, I believe like around a year ago. So I'll link all three of those videos in the description of this video, but yeah, now let's begin with comparing. So we'll compare them in a list of categories, and whichever trooper wins more categories wins overall. So for our first category, we're going to do strength. So, Storm Commandos have amazing combat training after their selection for the Stormtrooper Corps, but from what we know about Shadow Troopers, they're really just skilled troopers taken from the Stormtrooper Corps and given experimental gear and training on how to use that gear, but not really more training for combat. So I'm going to give the first category to the Storm Commandos. So now we have speed, and I think it could go to the Shadow Stormtroopers just because we see them running around so quickly all the time. Stealth. Now, I think that Storm Commandos have better stealth training, but Shadow Stormtroopers have their whole invis generators, so they definitely get another point here, which currently means that we are at a tie. Loyalty. While I think Storm Commandos could win this, they're just not loyal to the Empire, but more to their commanding officer. And if their commanding officer isn't loyal to the Empire, they're not loyal to the Empire. And since Shadow Stormtroopers are like fanatically loyal, like they will kill themselves for the Empire, they win this again. Now, for tech, while Storm Commandos could use whatever weapons they want, the tech of a Shadow Trooper is just so advanced and experimental. And I think the one thing that Storm Commandos have in tech that Shadow Stormtroopers don't have is Reflect coated armor. But Shadow Stormtroopers don't even need it. I think a couple of them probably did have Reflect. I just think as a whole, they don't all have Reflect. So that's another W for the Shadow Stormtroopers. Durability. While I think Shadow Stormtroopers can avoid being hit with their invisibility generators, I do think that once they are hit, they're pretty much done for, as their armor is really just standard Stormtrooper armor. Of course, Stormtrooper armor is very strong. I did a video about that as well on my channel. You can go check that out. I'm referencing a bunch of other videos, but that's probably because I have so many videos. I think I have around 60 or so. Anyways, sorry. While I really want the Storm Commandos to take this one, they take this one because they just have really good armor that can take some heavy damage. Maybe not Death Trooper level damage, but heavy damage. But this still means that these Stormtroop Commandos are losing badly in this category so far. So let's move on to the last category in this section of... I'll get to that later. Point accuracy. Now, while you think that their stealth training would allow the Shadow Troopers to take another W, I just don't think we really have the evidence to prove that they could outperform a Storm Commando in a sniper duel, even if they do have the advantage with their tech. But of course, we're not counting tech here, just actual accuracy. Alright, so since I covered a couple of small categories, I want to do a best of 3. So since Shadow Troopers won the most categories here, they win 1 point, while Storm Commandos have 0. That's the orange right there. You can see they just got updated. Now, round 2. Open combat. In a giant open battlefield, I think the Storm Commandos would come out on top. I can very easily see a group of like 6 Storm Commandos holding out waves of Shadow Stormtroopers while being surrounded, stuck in a small trench with their standard equipment to help defend them. Because to me, it just seems like Shadow Stormtroopers just throw themselves at a target and charge at them most of the time. And while in Legends we don't really see this, in games like Battlefront, that's literally all people do with them. They just charge at enemies and they're definitely way heavier armored in Battlefront than like stealth-wise. Anyways, in close combat, I think this could also go to the Storm Commandos, as they feel very much like a SEAL Team 6 type of unit, slowly clearing a base without many casualties. And I just don't think the stealth tech of the Shadow Stormtroopers would help them this much in the kind of battle, because they can't really sneak up on the Storm Commandos. A stealth battle. This might be the worst battle for the Storm Commandos, as stealth is a Shadow Trooper's natural habitat, but it's also the natural habitat of Storm Commandos, so I think it could really go anyway, though I think it's gonna probably go to the Storm Commandos. While the Shadow Troopers' Invis tech is very powerful, I just don't see many Commandos falling for it or being caught off guard by it. Even though I think that technically it goes to the Storm Commandos, I'm gonna give this to the Shadow Stormtroopers just because, they are a stealth unit and it's kind of more of a pity point at this point. Anyways, now the score is 1-1 in the orange, so it's up to this third round. And for this, I turn to the YouTube people to figure out who's really the best. And the results. Well, it's rather surprising. Well, I found hundreds of videos comparing Storm Commandos and Death Troopers in my other Versus videos, or ARC Troopers and Clone Commandos, or Stormtroopers and Clone Troopers. I could only find about 2 people talking about Storm Commandos and Shadow Stormtroopers. But from what I've seen, the community seems to be leaning towards the side of Storm Commandos being better, So it means Storm Commandos win their third round and therefore win the 2 out of 3. Okay, so since Storm Commandos won, we don't need to compare Death Troopers and Shadow Troopers together. As you know, Death Troopers were stronger than Commandos, as said by one of my earlier videos. And to be honest, I already knew how this battle would turn out, and that's why for the first round of comparing, I left out so many categories. And even at one point, and the reason I even gave the speed category to the Shadow Stormtroopers is because I realized that they ended up being tied in the first round, which is why you may notice some weird thing when I said they were tied when they weren't tied, because I re-recorded that after I noticed, and I didn't fully fix it. And yeah, so that's kind of why I left out so many categories I normally use in other versus videos from that first section, because I just wanted to make it seem a little bit more fair. Because in a fair fight, I have no doubt that you'd want a Storm Commando on your side and not a Shadow Stormtrooper. While a horde of Shadow Stormtroopers could definitely pose a threat, I think that it would take multiple squads of Shadow Stormtroopers to eliminate even a single squad of Storm Commandos. And I don't mean a full Stormtrooper squad of Storm Commandos, I mean a Storm Commando squad of Storm Commandos, which is around half the amount of troopers of a normal squad. What we really need is Storm Commandos with that stealth tech. But wait, we've already seen them using stealth tech like it, so you don't even really need Shadow Stormtroopers in my opinion. Of course, they're very elite, but I don't know. I just feel, and they're definitely very strong, just not as strong as other units like Storm Commandos or Death Troopers. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little introspective on Shadow Stormtroopers and the comparison between them and their close rivals. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a sub, as I'm trying to hit 300 subscribers by the end of 2025. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace out.